I'm Brett Schaefer, as Frank mentioned, and I'm here to talk about ConUNdrum, the limits of the United Nations and the search for alternatives. As you can sort of tell from the title, it's not necessarily a ringing endorsement of the current organization, and I think that's probably a message that will resonate with most people here. I think most of you, if not all of you, are conservatives, and you're likely skeptical of the United Nations. And I'm here to tell you that you're very right to be skeptical of the United Nations. The UN, as evidenced by a number of different examples, is very susceptible to corruption, fraud, waste, abuse, etc. You can point to examples with the Iraqi Oil for Food program. You can point to examples where UN peacekeepers are not disciplined and held to account for raping or abusing those that they're actually supposed to be protecting. And you can point to ongoing revelations about corruption and fraud involved in UN procurement. The UN is also a massively ineffective and mismanaged organization. Virtually all U.S. past efforts to reform it have been either watered down to the point of irrelevance, or they have been failed altogether. The few instances where you have seen successful reform have been linked to U.S. withholding funds to the organization and using its financial leverage to force reform on what is historically an unwilling organization. As conservatives, you also most likely have concluded that the UN is not necessarily a friendly forum for U.S. priorities and up in New York, or for that matter around the world. And again, you're right. The UN is not a friendly forum for the U.S. and its priorities there. It is populated by countries who are historically hostile to the United States and its interests, and for that matter, are hostile to the very founding principles of the organization itself. So why am I spending so much time talking about the organization? I mean, most conservatives that look at the UN either say it's irrelevant, we should ignore it, we should get out of it, or one of those two different options. And I'm here to tell you that's a mistake. We can't ignore the United Nations. The UN may be more trouble than it's worth, but it's trouble that we have to deal with. The fact of the matter is that even though the United States, the citizenship has a healthy skepticism of the organization and a recognition of its many flaws, that is not the fact in the other 191 countries around the world. Most countries, there is an enormous amount of support for the organization. And the fact of the matter is, even if the U.S. was not a member of the organization, it's not going to disappear, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. And that's a concern, because it can be a source of enormous mischief and counterproductive initiatives in terms of U.S. policy priorities. And conservatives need to do more than just criticize or ignore the United Nations. They need to have concrete ideas about what to do about it, how to fix it, or at the very least, what to do to minimize the damage that can be done through that organization. And that's where my book comes in. ConUNdrum has 10 chapters authored by experts from the Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, Competitive Enterprise Institute, the Catholic Family and Human Rights Institute, and other organizations. Ambassador John Bolton wrote the foreword to the book, talking about his efforts and interest and failures to reform the organization. And the chapters cover almost everything that the United Nations does. We have a chapter on diplomacy. We have a chapter on international law. We have a chapter on peacekeeping, environmental issues, human rights issues, economic, social, and cultural rights. We have a chapter on development, trade, arms control, international health, you name it, we probably cover it in some way, shape, or form in the book. And the purpose of ConUNdrum is to determine where the UN is necessary, useful, and effective, but more importantly, to determine where it's unnecessary, ineffective, or where it actually may be a hindrance to resolving the problems that are placed before it. And this stands in stark contrast to what you see from the current president. President Obama, for the most part, is embracing a policy of accommodation and encouragement at the United Nations. He's not challenging the organization to actually accomplish its founding principles. He's not challenging the organization to be effective. And this is something conservatives must fill in. This is a gap that we must fill. Conservatives, in order to do that, conservatives need to be armed with a detailed knowledge of what is wrong with the UN if they're going to make a convincing case for where the administration is wrong, or where the majority in Congress is wrong. They have to make a compelling, informed, and very strong case for where the organization is wrong and why we need to confront it on these different areas. And that is what I hope my book, ConUNdrum, will do. It will help inform conservatives on what the organization is, allow them to present the best case for their skepticism, and offer ideas on what to do about it. So I mean, I wanted to keep this brief, and if there are any specific questions that you have about the book or various subjects talking in the book, I'm happy to address them now.